You work harder every year, but somehow freedom keeps moving further away. You save money, but it disappears. You earn more, but your life doesn't feel richer. You stay busy, but deep down, you feel replaceable. And the question sits quietly in the background of your life. If I stop working, what happens to my income? For most people, the answer is uncomfortable. It stops. That's the trap. That's the invisible system millions are stuck inside. Trading time for money until time runs out. But there is another path, a quieter path, a path most people see every day but never truly understand. Buildings, apartments, homes, spaces. Because here's a truth that changes everything. Every building you've ever walked into is making someone else rich. And today, that realization becomes your turning point. Welcome to this audiobook, Real Estate Wealth Code, How Real Estate Creates Wealth. In this journey, you will not just learn about property, you will learn about power, control, leverage, and how ordinary people quietly build extraordinary lives through ownership. This is not about hype. This is not about overnight success. And this is absolutely not financial advice. This is about understanding a system that has created more long-term wealth than almost any other path in modern history. In this audiobook, you will discover how real estate transforms income into freedom, why ownership beats effort in the long run, how small beginnings, yes, even where you are right now, can grow into something unstoppable, and most importantly, how to shift your thinking from survival to strategy. Because here's your first truth. Write this down, remember it, let it echo in your mind. The moment your money starts working harder than you do, your life changes direction. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how some people seem calm about money? They're not rushing, they're not panicking, they're not chasing every opportunity, because they don't rely on effort alone. They've built something that works, even when they don't. That is the difference between income and assets. And as one of the most powerful ideas ever shared explains, if your money only comes when you work, you are still trapped. But if your money continues, even when you rest, you've stepped into a completely different reality. That's what real estate can become. Not just property, but a system, a machine, a quiet engine that produces income, stability, and long-term growth. And here's what makes this powerful. You don't need to start rich. You don't need to own skyscrapers. You don't need perfect timing. Because most people who build wealth in real estate start small, sometimes accidentally, sometimes uncertain, sometimes afraid. But they start, and that is where everything begins. This audiobook will take you through 25 chapters, each one designed to reshape how you see money, time, and opportunity. We'll begin with mindset, because without it, nothing lasts. Then we'll move into strategies, real, practical, grounded, then into growth, how small moves compound into life-changing results. And along the way, you will begin to see something differently, not just buildings, but possibilities, not just rent, but leverage, not just property, but freedom. So before we move into chapter 1, make a quiet decision, not for anyone else, not for appearances, not for motivation, for yourself. Decide that you will listen differently, not as entertainment, but as instruction. And if something in this audiobook resonates with you, if a line hits you, if you feel that moment of clarity, don't ignore it. That's not random. That's awareness. And awareness is always the first step toward change. If you're ready, we begin. Chapter 1. Stop working for money. Start owning the system. Most people believe the problem is income. They think, if I just earned more, everything would be fine. But that belief keeps them stuck. Because the real problem is not how much you earn. It's how your money behaves after you earn it. Think about this carefully. You work, you get paid, you spend, and then you start over again and again and again. That cycle feels normal, but normal is not the same as effective. Because in that cycle, nothing is growing, nothing is compounding, nothing is building beyond your effort. You are moving, but not advancing, and that's where the shift begins. The wealthy do not just earn money, they convert it. They turn income into assets. They take something temporary and transform it into something permanent. And real estate is one of the most powerful tools for doing exactly that, because unlike effort, property does not stop working. A building doesn't get tired. A unit doesn't ask for motivation. A space doesn't care about your mood. It produces consistently, quietly, relentlessly. That's why real estate is not just an investment. It's leverage. It's the ability to separate your time from your income. And that idea alone changes everything. But here's where most people hesitate. They think, I don't have enough money. I don't know enough. It's too risky. It's too late. And those thoughts feel real. But they are not the truth. They are just the result of never being shown another way. Because the reality is, many people begin with less than you think. A small apartment, a shared space, a simple opportunity. And from there, they build, step by step, decision by decision. And one day, they look up and realize they are no longer working just to survive. They are building something that works for them. This is not luck. This is design. And the moment you understand that, you stop chasing income and start building systems. But there's one more truth you need to hear before we go deeper, and it's not comfortable. No one is coming to do this for you. No one is going to build your future. No one is going to accidentally hand you financial freedom. If your life is going to change, it will be because you decided to understand something others ignored and act on it quietly, consistently, without needing validation. Because wealth, real wealth, is not loud in the beginning. It's built in silence and revealed over time. So now the question becomes, are you ready to see real estate differently? Not as something distant, but as something possible? Because in the next chapter, we're going to break one of the biggest myths that keeps people stuck. The idea that you need to be rich to start. And once that belief disappears, a completely new path opens. You don't need to be rich to start. You need to stop thinking like someone who's waiting, because waiting is the most expensive habit you will ever keep. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Lie That Keeps You Broke. There is a belief that quietly controls millions of lives. It sounds logical, it feels responsible, it even sounds intelligent. I'll invest when I have more money. And because of that sentence, years pass, opportunities pass, confidence fades, and life becomes a cycle of preparation without action. But here's the truth. Most people never realize you don't get rich first and then invest. You invest first, and that's how wealth begins. That's the inversion. That's the mental shift. And real estate makes this shift visible in a way few other paths can. Because most people imagine real estate as something massive. Luxury buildings, high-rise towers, million-dollar deals. But that's not where most stories begin. They begin small. A spare room, a shared apartment, a simple decision to turn a cost into an opportunity. And once that happens, everything changes, because the moment your home starts generating income, it stops being just a place to live. It becomes your first asset, your first system, your first step into ownership. This is what many call the entry door into real estate. Not flashy, not complicated, but powerful. And it often begins with one simple realization. What if this space could pay for itself? That question alone has changed lives. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now let's go deeper. Most people look at housing as an expense, something that takes money from them every single month. Rent, utilities, maintenance. It feels like a constant drain. But the moment you shift from consumer to participant, everything changes. Because now, instead of asking, how much does this cost me? You start asking, how can this produce for me? That's a completely different mindset. And mindset is where every transformation begins. Remember this, the same building can be a liability to one person and an asset to another. The difference is not the building, it's the thinking behind it. This is why some people stay stuck for decades, while others quietly build momentum. Because one group sees cost and the other sees potential. Now here's something important. This doesn't mean everything is easy. It doesn't mean every deal works. And it definitely doesn't mean there's no risk. But it does mean something powerful. You have more control than you think. And control is the foundation of freedom. Let's bring this into reality. Imagine two people, same income, same city, same starting point. The first person rents, pays every month, moves when needed, builds nothing beyond survival. The second person thinks differently. They look for ways to offset their costs. They explore, they learn, they take a small step. Maybe they share space. Maybe they find a way to generate income from where they live. It's not perfect, it's not glamorous, but it's a start. And that start compounds, month after month, year after year, until one day, the gap between them becomes impossible to ignore. Not because one worked harder, but because one built something that worked without them. That is the power of assets. That is the foundation of real estate wealth. And here's something you need to hear clearly. You don't need to understand everything to begin. You just need to understand enough to take the first step. Because clarity does not come before action. Clarity comes from action. Every mistake teaches, every experience sharpens, every step builds confidence, and slowly, you become someone who sees opportunities where others see obstacles. But there is something else holding people back, and it's deeper than money, deeper than knowledge. It's fear. Fear of making the wrong move, fear of losing money, fear of looking foolish. And that fear keeps people frozen. But here's the truth. Doing nothing is also a decision. And it carries its own cost. A hidden cost, a slow cost, a lifetime cost. Because every year you delay is a year you don't build. Every year you hesitate is a year that could have compounded. And compounding is where real wealth lives, not in one big moment, but in many small ones stacked over time. So the real question is not, can I afford to start? The real question is, can I afford to keep waiting? Because time is not neutral. Time either builds for you or it works against you. And once you understand that, you stop looking for perfect moments and you start creating movement. Now take a second, reflect. Where are you right now? Not where you want to be, not where you pretend to be. Where are you really? Because that honesty is your starting point. And from that point, everything becomes possible. If this is hitting you, if something is starting to shift in your thinking, pause for a moment, let it settle. And if this message resonates with you, make a quiet commitment, not to me, not to anyone else, to yourself, that you will not let this awareness fade, because awareness without action becomes regret. But awareness with action becomes transformation. And in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even deeper. The real engine behind real estate wealth, not the properties themselves, but the force that multiplies everything, leverage. And once you understand leverage, you will never look at effort the same way again. Leverage. It's a word that sounds technical, but in reality, it's simple. And once you understand it, you begin to see the world differently. Chapter 3. The hidden engine of wealth. Leverage. Most people believe wealth comes from working harder. More hours, more effort, more sacrifice. And for a while, that works. You earn more, you feel progress, you think you're getting closer, but then something strange happens. You hit a ceiling because there are only so many hours in a day, only so much energy in your body, only so much time you can trade. And that's when most people get stuck, not because they lack ambition, but because they're playing a game with limits. And wealth, real wealth, does not come from limited systems. It comes from leverage. Leverage is the ability to do more without doing more. Let that sink in. It means your results are no longer tied directly to your effort. It means one action can produce results again and again and again. That's the shift. That's the difference between working for money and building something that works for you. Now, leverage exists in many forms. People, technology, capital. But real estate brings them all together in one place. Think about it. When you own a property, you are not the only one contributing to its value. Tenants contribute through rent. Time contributes through appreciation. The system contributes through demand and growth. And suddenly, you're no longer the only source of income. That's leverage. You're building something where multiple forces work in your favor, even when you're not actively doing anything. And that's powerful, because now your life is no longer dependent on constant motion. Now let's break this down in a way that hits deeper. Imagine planting a tree. At first, it requires effort. Watering, care, patience. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. But over time, that tree grows. And eventually, it produces fruit. And once it does, you don't have to force it. You don't have to beg it. It produces because that's what it was built to do. That's what real estate becomes when done right. A system that produces, not instantly, but consistently. And consistency is what creates stability. Now here's where most people misunderstand leverage. They think it's about doing nothing. It's not. Leverage is not about avoiding work. It's about doing the right work once and allowing it to multiply. That's a completely different mindset, because now you're not chasing quick wins. You're building long-term systems, and systems are what create freedom. Let's bring this into reality again. When you buy a property, yes, there is effort, research, decisions, responsibility. But once it's set up properly, something incredible happens. That property starts producing income month after month, not because you worked every hour, but because you built something that works without constant input. That's leverage in action. Now compare that to a job. You work 1 hour, you get paid once. You stop working, the income stops. There is no multiplication. There is no continuation. There is only exchange. And exchange will never make you free because it always requires your presence. Leverage removes that dependency, and that's why it matters so much. But there's a deeper layer, and this is where things become truly powerful. Leverage doesn't just change your income, it changes your thinking. Because once you experience income that isn't tied to your time, you begin to question everything. You begin to ask, what else can I build? What else can work for me? What else have I been overlooking? And suddenly, you're no longer thinking like a worker. You're thinking like a builder. And that identity shift is where real transformation happens. Because your results always follow your identity. Always. Now, here's something important. Leverage requires responsibility. It requires awareness. It requires discipline. Because if you build something poorly, it won't produce. If you rush decisions, it can cost you. So this is not about blind action. This is about intentional action. Learning, understanding, applying, step by step. And yes, there will be moments of uncertainty. Moments where you doubt yourself. Moments where things don't go perfectly. That's part of the process. But here's what you need to remember. Every system that works today was once something someone had to figure out. You are not behind. You are not late. You are simply at the beginning. And beginnings always feel uncertain. But they are also where everything starts. So don't let that stop you. Let it guide you. Now pause for a second. Think about your current life. How much of your income depends entirely on you? Be honest, because that answer shows you exactly where you stand. And more importantly, it shows you what needs to change. Because the goal is not just to earn more. The goal is to depend less. Less on your time, less on constant effort, less on external control, and more on systems, more on ownership, more on leverage. That's the path, and once you step onto it, you don't see things the same way again. Now, as we move forward, we're going to get even more practical, because understanding leverage is powerful, but applying it is what changes your life. In the next chapter, we're going to break down the first real strategy many people use to enter real estate: simple, accessible, and surprisingly effective. A method that allows you to start without needing massive resources. And once you see how it works, you'll realize something important. You were never as far away as you thought. And this is where things start to feel real. Because up until now, we've been shifting how you think. But now, we step into how you act. Chapter 4. The Entry Strategy. Turning where you live into an asset. Most people believe their first real estate move has to be big. A large investment. A perfect deal. A moment where everything aligns. But that belief delays action. Because big moves require confidence. And confidence only comes after experience. So instead of waiting for something perfect, you start with something practical. Something simple. Something that already exists in your life, your living space. Let me ask you something. Right now, where you live. Is it costing you, or could it be helping you? That question alone has changed more financial lives than most strategies ever will, because the moment your home starts producing income, you step into a completely different position. You're no longer just paying to exist. You're participating in a system. This is what many call house hacking. But forget the label for a moment. Focus on the principle. You take a space, and instead of letting it drain you, you make it contribute. That's it. Simple in concept, powerful in execution. And here's what makes this so important. It lowers your barrier to entry. Because instead of needing a separate investment property, you begin with what you already need anyway, a place to live. Now imagine this. You're living in a 2-bedroom space. Maybe you already share it. Maybe you don't. But instead of splitting everything evenly, you start thinking strategically. You take on more control of the situation. You manage the space. You create structure. And slowly, you shift from participant to operator. And that shift matters because now you're not just living, you're learning. You're understanding how money flows through property, how people interact with space, how value is created. And these lessons, they compound just like income, because the first deal you make is rarely about the money. It's about the experience, the awareness, the confidence. And once you have that, you're no longer guessing, you're building. This is why so many real estate journeys start small, because small removes pressure, small allows learning, small creates movement, and movement creates momentum. Now let's go deeper into the mindset behind this. Most people approach housing emotionally. Comfort, convenience, familiarity. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you begin to think like an investor, you add another layer, function. You begin asking, what role does this play in my financial life? Not just, how does this feel? And that question changes your decisions, because now you're not just choosing a place to stay. You're choosing a system to participate in, and that's where things start to evolve. Now, here's something important to understand. This approach is not about sacrifice, it's about strategy. Because some people hear this and think, I don't want to give up comfort. But that's not the point. The point is to align your current situation with your future goals, to make your present decisions support your long-term vision. Because every choice you make either builds your future or delays it. There is no neutral. Now think about this. If you can reduce your living expenses or even eliminate them, what happens? You free up capital. You create breathing room. You gain flexibility. And flexibility is one of the most underrated forms of power, because when you're not financially stretched, you can make better decisions. You can take opportunities. You can think clearly. That's what this first step creates. Not just income, but space. And space allows growth. Now let's address something honestly. This step can feel uncomfortable. You might have to manage people, handle situations, step into responsibility. And for many, that's unfamiliar, but that's exactly why it matters. Because growth always lives just outside your comfort zone, and every skill you develop here prepares you for the next level. Because real estate is not just about property, it's about people, communication, expectations, trust. And the sooner you learn that, the stronger your foundation becomes. Now here's a truth you need to remember. Your first deal is not about perfection. It's about participation. It's about stepping into the game. Because once you're in, everything changes. You stop watching, you start learning, you stop guessing, you start understanding. And that's when confidence begins to build, quietly, naturally, without force. Now pause again. Imagine your life 1 year from now. Same job, same routine, but one difference. Your living situation contributes to you instead of draining you. How would that feel? Less pressure, more control, more possibility. That's not a dream, that's a decision, and decisions create direction. Now, if this idea is starting to shift something in you, if you're beginning to see your current situation differently, don't ignore that. That's awareness expanding. And expansion is where change begins. If this resonates, make another quiet commitment that you will start looking at your environment differently, not just as something you exist in, but as something you can optimize. Because opportunity rarely announces itself. It hides in plain sight, and only those who look differently find it. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to build on this foundation, because once you take your first step, the next question becomes, how do I scale? How do you move from one opportunity to multiple? How do you turn small beginnings into something significant? And more importantly, how do ordinary people quietly build portfolios that change their entire lives? That's where we're going next. And once you see it, you'll realize something powerful. This is not about luck. It's about patterns. And once you begin to see patterns, you stop chasing luck. Because luck feels random, but patterns can be repeated. Hey there, we want to remind you that we often choose topics suggested by you, our viewers, in the comments. In the comments, you can suggest a topic or ask a question about what you'd like to see in our video. We read every comment carefully, so we promise not to miss a single one. Thank you. Let's keep going. Chapter 5, From One Door to Many. The Pattern of Expansion. Most people think wealth comes from one big moment, one perfect deal, one massive breakthrough, one life-changing opportunity. But real estate doesn't work that way. It builds quietly, step by step, and the people who win in this space, they don't rely on luck. They follow patterns, simple, repeatable patterns. And it always starts the same way. One property, one decision, one shift from consumer to owner. But here's where things begin to separate. Most people stop after the first step. They feel relief, they feel progress, they feel comfortable again. And comfort becomes their ceiling. But others, they ask a different question. If I did this once, how can I do it again? That question changes everything, because now you're not just solving a problem, you're building a system, and systems can scale. Now let's break this down in a way that matters. Your first move teaches you how to analyze opportunities, how to manage risk, how to understand value, and once you've done it once, you're no longer guessing. You're refining, you're improving, you're becoming more precise. And that precision is what allows growth, because the second move is never as hard as the first, and the third becomes even clearer. And before you realize it, you're no longer starting, you're expanding. This is the pattern. Not explosive, but exponential. Now here's the part most people don't see. Growth in real estate is not just about acquiring more properties. It's about increasing control. Control over income, control over decisions, control over your financial future, because every asset you add reduces your dependence on effort and increases your independence from systems you don't control. That's the real game. Not accumulation for ego, but accumulation for freedom. Now imagine this. One property produces a small amount of income. Not life-changing, but meaningful. Now imagine 2, 3, 5. Each one contributing. Each one compounding. And suddenly, your income is no longer coming from one source. It's diversified, stabilized, strengthened, and that's where real security begins. Because when your income is spread across multiple sources, you become harder to disrupt, harder to break, harder to control, and that is a level of freedom most people never reach. Now let's talk about something deeper. Scaling is not just a financial process, it's a mental evolution. Because as your assets grow, your identity must grow with them. You can't think small and build big. You can't stay passive and expect expansion. You must become more aware, more disciplined, more intentional, because growth demands responsibility, and responsibility shapes you. Now, this is where many people hesitate again. They think, what if I fail? What if I make a mistake? What if I lose what I've built? And those fears, they are real, but they are also part of the process. Because every level brings new challenges, new decisions, new uncertainties. But here's the truth. You don't grow by avoiding problems. You grow by becoming someone who can handle them. That's the shift. Because once you understand that, you stop fearing growth and you start preparing for it. Now let's connect this back to your life. Where are you right now in this pattern? Are you still thinking about starting? Have you taken your first step? Or are you somewhere in between? Unsure how to move forward? Wherever you are, that's your position. And your position determines your next move, not someone else's, not what you see online, yours. Because comparison will only confuse you. But clarity comes from understanding your own path. Now here's something powerful to remember. Every large portfolio was once a single decision. Every investor you admire started uncertain, started small, started exactly where you are now. The difference is they didn't stop. They kept going, quietly, consistently, without needing attention, without needing validation. And over time, their results spoke for them. That's the pattern. Now take a moment. Think long term, not next week, not next month, 5 years, 10 years. If you started now, if you followed the pattern, if you stayed consistent, where could you be? Not perfectly, not instantly, but realistically, because time will pass anyway. The question is, what will it build for you? Now, if this is starting to shift your perspective, if you're beginning to see how small moves can become big outcomes, stay with that feeling. That's understanding forming, and understanding is the foundation of action. If this resonates, if you feel that quiet clarity, take another step internally. Decide that you will think long-term, that you will not get distracted by short-term noise. Because wealth is not built in noise. It's built in consistency. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something critical, something that can either accelerate your growth or quietly destroy it. Debt. Because in real estate, debt is not just risk. It's also a tool. And how you understand it will determine how far you go. And this is where most people either accelerate or collapse. Because the next concept you're about to understand has built empires and destroyed lives. Chapter 6, Debt, the Weapon or the Trap. Most people are afraid of debt. And honestly, they should be. Because the way most people use debt is dangerous. They borrow to consume. They borrow to impress. They borrow to escape discomfort. And then they spend years paying for decisions that gave them nothing in return. That kind of debt is a trap. It takes from your future to fund your present. And slowly, it locks you into a cycle. More payments, more pressure, more dependence on income. That's the version of debt most people know. And because of that, they avoid it completely. But here's where the conversation changes. In real estate, debt can become something entirely different. Not a burden, but a tool. Not something that drains you, but something that helps you build. And the difference comes down to one simple principle. Does the debt produce or does it consume? That's it. If the debt is attached to something that generates income, it can serve you. If it's attached to something that only costs you, it controls you. That's the line. And once you see it clearly, you stop fearing debt and start understanding it. Now let's go deeper. In real estate, many people don't buy properties with all their own money. They use leverage. They use financing. They use systems that allow them to control larger assets without needing everything up front. And when done correctly, those assets produce income. Income that can cover the cost of the debt and sometimes go beyond it. That's where the shift happens. Because now, you're not paying for the debt alone. The asset is helping carry it. And over time, as the debt reduces and the asset continues producing, you move into a stronger position. Ownership, control, cash flow. This is why understanding debt is critical, because it can either slow your life down or speed it up. But here's where you need to be careful. This is not a shortcut. This is not a game. And this is definitely not something to approach blindly. Because if you misuse leverage, if you rush decisions, if you ignore fundamentals, debt can turn against you quickly. That's why awareness matters. That's why discipline matters. That's why patience matters. Because smart use of debt requires clarity. You need to understand what you're buying, why you're buying it, how it produces, and what happens if things don't go perfectly. Because they won't always go perfectly. And that's okay, as long as you're prepared. Now here's something powerful to remember. Debt is not the problem. Lack of understanding is. Because the same tool, used differently, creates completely different outcomes. Now let's bring this into your world. Think about your current financial life. Do you have obligations, payments, commitments? Now ask yourself honestly, are those obligations building something for you or just maintaining your current situation? That question can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because once you see where your money is going, you can begin to redirect it, not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. And intention is where control begins. Now let's talk about something deeper again, emotional control. Because money decisions are rarely just logical, they're emotional, fear, greed, pressure, comparison. All of these influence how people use debt. And if you don't manage those emotions, they will manage you. That's when mistakes happen. That's when people overextend. That's when they take risks they don't fully understand. And that's when things fall apart. So before you ever think about scaling, before you ever think about expanding, you must build control, not just financial, but emotional. Because the stronger you are internally, the better your decisions externally. Now pause again. Think long term. What kind of relationship do you want with money? fear-based, reactive, stressful, or strategic, intentional, controlled, because that relationship will shape every outcome, and real estate will amplify it. So if your foundation is strong, your growth can be powerful. But if your foundation is weak, growth can expose it. That's why this chapter matters so much, because it's not just about debt, it's about how you think, how you decide, how you respond under pressure. And those traits will follow you into every deal, every opportunity, every level. Now, if this is resonating, if you're starting to see money differently, stay with that awareness, because you're not just learning strategies. You're building a new perspective, and perspective changes everything. If something in this chapter hits you, take a moment, reflect on it. And if you feel that shift happening, that deeper understanding, make another quiet promise that you will not rush, that you will not act out of emotion, that you will build with intention, because slow, intentional growth always outlasts fast, emotional decisions. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to move into something that separates those who struggle from those who quietly win: cash flow. Because owning property is one thing, but making sure it actually pays you, that's where the real game begins. And once you understand how to control cash flow, you stop guessing and start designing outcomes, because owning property means nothing if it doesn't actually pay you. Chapter 7. Cash flow, the lifeblood of real estate wealth. There's a mistake many beginners make. They focus on ownership instead of outcome. They say, I just want to own property. But ownership alone does not create freedom. You can own something and still feel trapped. You can hold an asset and still feel pressure every single month, because the real question is not, do you own real estate? The real question is, does your real estate pay you, or do you pay for it? That's the line. That's where everything separates. Cash flow is the money left over after everything is paid, after expenses, after obligations, after reality. It's what actually reaches you, not on paper, not in theory, in real life. And if your properties are not producing cash flow, then you are not building freedom. You are building responsibility. Now let's slow this down, because this matters deeply. Many people get excited about appreciation, the idea that a property increases in value over time, and yes, that can be powerful, but appreciation is silent. It doesn't pay your bills today. It doesn't reduce your stress this month. It doesn't give you breathing room right now. Cash flow does. Cash flow is immediate. It's present. It's tangible. And for many people, it's the difference between feeling stuck and feeling in control. Now, this doesn't mean appreciation doesn't matter. It does. But cash flow is what sustains you. It's what allows you to hold your assets long enough for appreciation to work. Without cash flow, pressure builds, decisions become rushed, mistakes happen, and people are forced to exit before their investments have time to grow. That's why this chapter is critical, because if you understand cash flow, you don't just invest, you design, you structure, you think ahead. Now, let's bring this into a clear perspective. Imagine you own a property. It generates income every month. But after all expenses, there's nothing left. Or worse, you have to add money from your own pocket. That's not freedom, that's stress, that's dependency. Now imagine a different scenario. The property produces income. Expenses are covered, and there's something left, even a small amount. That surplus, that margin, That's cash flow. And that margin is where power begins. Because now you're not just maintaining, you're growing. Now let's go deeper again. Cash flow is not just about numbers, it's about control. Because when your properties produce consistently, you gain options. You can reinvest, you can save, you can expand. You are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And choice is the foundation of freedom. Now here's where discipline enters the picture again. Because generating cash flow requires attention. It requires understanding your numbers, your costs, your risks, your margins. It requires you to think like a builder, not just a buyer. Because buying is easy. Managing, optimizing, that's where skill is developed, and skill is what allows you to scale. Now let's talk about something most people ignore. Small margins. Because many people overlook small positive cash flow. They think it's not enough. It doesn't matter. But that thinking misses the bigger picture, because small margins compound. One property producing a small amount becomes multiple properties producing more. And over time, those small amounts become significant. That's the pattern again. Quiet growth, consistent build, no need for noise, no need for attention, just progress. Now here's a powerful line to remember. Cash flow is not about how much you make, it's about how much stays. Because income can look impressive, but if nothing remains, there is no growth. Now pause again. Think about your current financial life. When money comes in, what happens to it? Does it stay or does it disappear? Because that pattern will follow you into real estate. If you don't control it now, you won't control it later. That's why awareness matters. Because awareness leads to adjustment, and adjustment leads to improvement. Now here's something deeper. Cash flow creates confidence, not hype-based confidence, not temporary excitement, real confidence. Because when you know something is producing, you move differently, you think differently, you act differently. You're not desperate, you're not rushed, you're grounded. And that state leads to better decisions. Now imagine this. You wake up and you know that something you built is producing income. Not because you showed up that morning, but because you designed it that way. That feeling is different. It's quiet, but it's powerful. And that's what you're building toward. Not just money, but stability. Not just income, but control. Now, if this chapter is hitting you, if you're starting to understand the importance of cash flow, hold on to that, because this concept will guide many of your future decisions. If something here resonates, take a moment, reflect, and make another internal commitment that you will not chase deals blindly, that you will focus on what actually produces, because production is what sustains growth. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper, because once you understand cash flow, the next question becomes, how do I find the right opportunities? How do you identify properties that actually work? How do you avoid bad deals and recognize good ones? Because not all properties are equal, and the ability to see the difference is what separates beginners from builders. Because finding the right deal is where everything either begins to work or quietly falls apart. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 8. Seeing what others miss. How to recognize real opportunities. Most people look at properties, but they don't really see them. They see walls, they see price tags, they see surface-level details, but investors, they see something different. They see potential. They see numbers. They see what could be, not just what is, and that ability is what separates average decisions from powerful ones. Now let's slow this down because this chapter is not about luck. It's about training your perception. It's about learning how to look at the same opportunity and extract more meaning from it. Because the truth is, opportunities are everywhere, but recognition is rare. Now here's the first shift you need to make. Stop asking, do I like this property? Start asking, does this property work? That's a completely different question, because liking something is emotional, but evaluating something is strategic, and strategy is what protects you. Now, what does working actually mean? It means the numbers make sense. It means the income potential supports the structure. It means the risk is understood, not ignored. And most importantly, it means the property serves a purpose in your long-term plan. Because without a plan, even good opportunities can become bad decisions. Now let's go deeper into what you should actually look for. First, location. Not just in terms of prestige, but in terms of demand. Are people moving there? Is there growth? Are there reasons people want to stay? Because demand drives income, and without demand, even a beautiful property struggles. Second, numbers. This is where emotion must disappear. You need to understand how much income it can generate, what the expenses will be, what the realistic outcome looks like, not best-case scenario, not optimistic projections, reality. Because reality is what you live with. Third, flexibility. Can this property be used in multiple ways? Can it adapt? Because the more flexible something is, the more resilient it becomes. And resilience is what protects your growth. Now here's something powerful to remember. A good deal is not what looks impressive. It's what performs consistently. Because consistency builds stability, and stability builds confidence. Now let's talk about something that traps many people. Shiny deals. Opportunities that look exciting, but don't hold up under pressure. They promise high returns. They feel urgent. They push you to act quickly, and that urgency can cloud your thinking. Because when emotions rise, logic falls. That's why discipline matters, because discipline allows you to step back, to analyze, to question, to verify, and those actions protect you. Now here's a deeper truth. You don't need a perfect deal. You need a solid one, because perfection is often an illusion, but solid fundamentals create real results. Now let's connect this back to your mindset again. As you grow in real estate, you must become more patient, more selective, more intentional, because not every opportunity is your opportunity. And knowing when to say no is just as important as knowing when to say yes. Now pause again. Think about your decision-making in life. Do you rush? Do you follow emotion? Do you act under pressure? Because those patterns will show up here too. And if you don't recognize them, they will cost you. But if you become aware, you can change them. And change is where improvement begins. Now, here's something practical. When you look at any opportunity, slow yourself down. Ask better questions. Challenge your assumptions. Because clarity comes from depth, not speed. And the more you train yourself to think this way, the stronger your decisions become. Now imagine this. You walk into a property. Someone else sees a cost. You see a system. They see walls. You see income potential. They see risk. You see structure. That's the shift. And once it happens, you can't go back, because now you're not just reacting, you're analyzing, you're building, you're thinking differently, and different thinking creates different results. Now, if this chapter is resonating, if you feel that shift in how you observe things, stay with it, because this is not just about real estate, it's about perception, and perception shapes your entire life. If something here hit you, take a moment, reflect, and commit to becoming more aware, because awareness is your greatest advantage. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something most people underestimate, but it quietly determines success or failure: time. Not just time passing, but how time interacts with your investments. Because real estate is not just about what you buy. It's about how long you hold it. And once you understand time, you begin to unlock something even more powerful: compounding. Because time is not just passing. Time is either building your future or quietly working against it. Chapter 9. Time, the silent multiplier. Most people underestimate time. They treat it like something they can always get back. They delay decisions. They postpone action. They wait for the right moment. But time doesn't wait. It moves constantly, and whether you act or not, it compounds. That's the part most people miss, because compounding is not just about money, it's about direction. Small actions repeated over time build something, but so do small delays, so do missed opportunities, so does hesitation, and that's why time is so powerful. Because it doesn't care what you choose, it just amplifies it. Now let's bring this into real estate. When you acquire a property, something begins, not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily, month by month. Payments are made, value may increase, income continues, and over time, what once felt small becomes significant. That's compounding, and it's quiet. There's no excitement in the beginning, no big moment, just consistency. And consistency builds momentum. Now here's the part that changes everything. The earlier you start, the more time works for you. Not because you're smarter, not because you're luckier, but because you gave yourself more runway, more time to grow, more time to recover from mistakes, more time to build something meaningful. That's the advantage. Now imagine two people again. Same starting point, same opportunity. One starts now, the other waits 5 years. Just 5. The first person has 5 years of progress, 5 years of learning, 5 years of compounding. The second person has none of that. And when they finally start, they're not just beginning, they're catching up. And catching up is always harder than starting. Now let that sink in. Because this is not about pressure. This is about awareness. You don't need to rush. But you do need to move, because movement activates time in your favor. Now here's something deeper. Time rewards patience, but it punishes hesitation. Patience is intentional. It's controlled. It's based on understanding. Hesitation is fear. It's avoidance. It's delay without direction. And those two lead to completely different outcomes. Now let's connect this to real estate again. Many of the most successful investors did not build wealth overnight. They held. They waited. They allowed time to do its work, because they understood something powerful. You don't get paid just for what you buy. You get paid for how long you hold. That's the game. Not speed, but endurance. Not quick wins, but sustained growth. Now, here's where discipline comes back again. because holding requires control. There will be moments where things feel slow, moments where progress feels invisible, moments where doubt creeps in. And in those moments, many people quit. They exit too early. They lose patience. They interrupt the process, and because of that, they never experience the full power of compounding. But those who stay, those who remain consistent, those who trust the process, they see something different. They see growth, not sudden, but undeniable. Now pause again. Think about your life. Where have you been impatient? Where have you started something, then stopped before it had time to work? Because that pattern, if not changed, will follow you here too. But if you recognize it, you can break it. And once you break it, you step into a different level of control. Now imagine this. You make a decision today, a small one. You begin building something. You stay consistent. You stay patient. And over time, that decision grows, it strengthens, it compounds, until one day you look back and realize that one small step changed everything. That's the power of time, not dramatic, but unstoppable. Now here's a line you need to remember. Time doesn't make things better. It multiplies what you build. So the question becomes, what are you building? Because whatever it is, time is already working on it. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you feel that shift in how you see time, hold on to it, because this awareness will guide your decisions. If something here hits you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet decision that you will stop waiting for perfect moments and start creating movement. Because movement is what activates everything. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even deeper, something most people ignore, but it quietly determines how far you go. Your environment. Because who you surround yourself with, what you listen to, what you consume daily, all of it shapes your thinking, and your thinking shapes your results. And once you understand that, you begin to take control, not just of your actions, but of your direction, because your environment is shaping you every single day, whether you realize it or not. Chapter 10, Environment, the invisible force behind every decision. Most people think success is about discipline alone. They say, I just need more motivation. I need to try harder. I need to push myself. But they ignore something deeper, something quieter, something far more powerful, their environment. Because here's the truth. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your environment. And if your environment doesn't support growth, it will slowly pull you back, no matter how motivated you feel. Now let's slow this down. Your environment is not just where you live. It's what you hear, what you see, what you consume, who you spend time with. It's the conversations around you, the beliefs that surround you, the expectations that feel normal, and all of that shapes how you think. Now connect that to real estate. If you're surrounded by people who only see risk, you will hesitate. If you're surrounded by people who never invest, you will delay. If you're surrounded by people who normalize struggle, you will accept it, not because you want to, but because it feels familiar, and familiarity is powerful. Now here's the shift. If you want to build something different, you must expose yourself to something different. New ideas, new perspectives, new standards, because your thinking can only expand to what it has been exposed to. That's why education matters. That's why awareness matters. That's why what you're listening to right now matters. Because every idea you absorb either strengthens your current life or challenges it. And growth always begins with challenge. Now let's go deeper. Environment also shapes your standards, what you accept, what you tolerate, what you believe is possible. And those standards quietly determine your actions. Because if your standard is survival, you will make survival-based decisions. If your standard is growth, you will make growth-based decisions. And those decisions create different outcomes. Now here's something important. Changing your environment doesn't always mean changing your location. Sometimes it means changing your input, what you listen to daily, what you read, what you focus on. Because even if your physical environment stays the same, your mental environment can evolve. And once your thinking changes, your actions follow. Now let's talk about something many people struggle with: outgrowing their environment. Because as you grow, as you think differently, as you pursue new paths, you may start to feel disconnected, misunderstood, even judged, and that's uncomfortable because humans are wired for belonging. But growth often requires separation, not permanently, not emotionally, but mentally. You must be willing to think differently, even if it's not popular, because popularity does not create progress. Now, here's a powerful line to remember. If everyone around you thinks the same, no one is growing. And growth is what you're here for. Now let's bring this back to real estate again. If you want to succeed in this space, you must normalize ownership. You must normalize learning. You must normalize thinking long-term. Because once those ideas feel normal, your actions align naturally. You're no longer forcing yourself. You're following your environment. Now pause again. Look at your current environment. Be honest. What does it encourage? What does it reward? What does it make easy? And more importantly, what does it make difficult? Because those answers reveal everything. Now this is not about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you see it, you can change it step by step, input by input, decision by decision. And over time, your environment begins to shift. And when it does, everything becomes easier, not effortless, but aligned. Now imagine this. You surround yourself with ideas that push you, with people who think bigger, with content that challenges your limits. What happens? Your thinking expands, your standards rise, your actions improve, and your results follow. That's the power of environment, not dramatic, but constant. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you're starting to see how your surroundings influence you, stay with that awareness, because this understanding will shape your future decisions. If something here hits you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will become intentional about what you allow into your mind, because what enters your mind eventually shapes your life. Now in the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper, because once your environment supports you, the next step is mastering something internal, your habits, because habits are the daily actions that build your future. And in real estate, just like in life, it's not what you do once, it's what you do consistently that creates results. Because habits are the bridge between what you know and what you actually become. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you are watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 11, Habits, the Daily Blueprint of Wealth. Most people think success is built in big moments, major decisions, huge opportunities, life-changing events. But those moments are rare. What's constant is what you do every day, quietly, repeatedly, without attention, and those daily actions become your habits. Now, here's the truth most people underestimate. Your future is not built by what you do occasionally. It's built by what you do consistently. That's the difference, because one smart decision won't change your life, but a pattern of smart decisions will. Now, let's connect this to real estate. Building wealth through property is not about one deal. It's about the habits that support every deal, the way you think, the way you analyze, the way you manage money, the way you respond under pressure. Those habits determine your outcomes. Now let's break this down. There are habits that build wealth and habits that quietly destroy it. The difference is subtle, but the impact is massive. Let's start with building habits. The habit of learning. Taking time to understand what you're doing, not rushing, not guessing, because knowledge reduces mistakes, and fewer mistakes mean faster growth. The habit of tracking, knowing your numbers, understanding your income, being aware of your expenses, because what you track, you can improve. The habit of patience, not chasing quick wins, not reacting emotionally, allowing time to do its work, because patience protects your progress. And then there's the habit of action, not perfect action, not constant action, but consistent action, small steps, repeated, focused. Now let's look at the other side, the habits that destroy progress, avoidance, ignoring decisions that need to be made, delaying action, waiting for clarity that only comes from movement, distraction, spending time on things that don't build anything, scrolling, comparing, consuming without applying, and the most dangerous one, emotional decision-making, acting out of fear, acting out of pressure, acting without clarity. These habits slow everything down, and over time, they create stagnation. Now here's something powerful. Habits are not formed in big moments. They are formed in small ones. The decision to learn instead of scroll. The decision to analyze instead of rush. The decision to act instead of delay. These moments feel small, but they stack. Day after day, week after week, and eventually they define you. Now let's go deeper. Habits create identity, and identity drives behavior. If you see yourself as someone who avoids risk, you will hesitate. If you see yourself as someone who builds, you will act. That's why habits matter so much, because they shape how you see yourself. And once that identity is formed, everything becomes easier. Now imagine this. You become someone who looks at opportunities daily, thinks strategically, acts consistently, reflects regularly. What happens? You don't need motivation. You don't need external pressure. You operate from habit, and habits don't require emotion. They require repetition. Now here's a line to remember. Discipline feels hard in the moment, but regret lasts much longer. And habits are the system of discipline, not forced, but built. Now pause again. Think about your daily life. What habits are shaping you right now? Be honest, because awareness is the first step to change. And once you see your patterns, you can begin to shift them, not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. Now let's connect this back to real estate one more time. If you build the right habits, Every deal becomes easier. Every decision becomes clearer. Every step becomes more aligned because you are no longer relying on willpower. You are relying on structure, and structure creates stability. Now imagine your future self, not dramatically different, just more consistent, more disciplined, more aware. What would that version of you achieve? Because that version is built through habits. Nothing else. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you're starting to see how small daily actions shape everything, stay with that understanding, because this is where real change happens, not in moments of motivation, but in patterns of behavior. If something here hit you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will take control of your habits. Because once you control your habits, you begin to control your outcomes. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to step into something practical again, something that many people overlook, but it directly impacts your ability to grow. Income. Because before you can invest, you must understand how to optimize what you earn. And once you learn how to increase and direct your income properly, you accelerate everything. Because income is not just something you earn, it's something you direct. Chapter 12. Income. Fuel for the machine. Most people think income is the goal. Earn more, work harder, get paid. And for a while, that feels like progress. But here's the truth. Income alone does not create wealth. Because income can disappear. It comes in, and then it goes out. Bills, expenses, lifestyle, and before you realize it, you're back where you started, working again to maintain the same position. That's the cycle, and that's why so many people feel stuck, even when they earn more, because they never change what their income does. Now, this is where everything shifts. Income is not the goal. Income is the fuel. Fuel for what? Assets, systems, growth. Because without direction, income becomes consumption. But with direction, income becomes transformation. Now let's slow this down. Every dollar you earn has a decision attached to it. Spend it or build with it, and that decision, repeated over time, defines your financial life. Now here's the part most people overlook. You don't need to earn dramatically more. To start building, you need to manage what you already earn differently, because small redirections create big outcomes over time. Now let's bring this into real estate. Before you can invest, you need capital. Not massive amounts, but something. And that something comes from your income. So the question becomes, how do you create more usable income? Not just more money, but more available money. Now there are two paths: increase income or optimize expenses. And ideally, you do both. But here's something important. Increasing income is not just about working more. It's about increasing value, skills, knowledge, opportunities. Because the more value you bring, the more income you can generate. And that income becomes fuel for your investments. Now let's talk about optimizing expenses. This is where many people resist. Because it feels restrictive, it feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth. Every expense you reduce is money you can redirect toward your future. And that redirection is what builds momentum. Now, this doesn't mean you eliminate everything. It means you become intentional. You stop spending unconsciously. You start asking, is this building something or just maintaining comfort? Because comfort can become expensive. And if you're not careful, it will consume everything you earn. Now let's connect this to mindset again. Most people increase their lifestyle as soon as they increase their income. They earn more, so they spend more, and they stay in the same position. But builders do something different. They increase their investments before they increase their lifestyle. And that shift creates long-term growth because now their income is working, not just flowing. Now here's something powerful to remember. You don't build wealth from what you earn. You build it from what you keep and invest. That's the difference. Now let's go deeper. Income also affects your speed. The more efficiently you manage it, the faster you can move, the faster you can acquire assets, the faster you can build systems. And over time, that speed compounds. Now imagine this. You take control of your income, you increase it intentionally, you reduce unnecessary leakage, you direct it toward assets. What happens? Momentum. You move faster. You grow stronger, you build stability, and that stability creates confidence. Now pause again. Look at your current income, not the number, the behavior. What is it doing for you? Be honest, because that answer reveals your trajectory. Now this is not about judgment, it's about awareness, because once you see it, you can change it step by step, decision by decision. Now here's something deeper. Income reflects discipline, because how you manage money is rarely about knowledge, it's about behavior, and behavior is shaped by habits, which is why the previous chapter matters so much, because without strong habits, even high income won't help. But with strong habits, even moderate income can build something powerful. Now imagine your future again. Same income, but directed differently. Instead of disappearing, it builds. Instead of maintaining, it grows. And over time, it transforms your position. That's the power of direction. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you're starting to see income differently, stay with that awareness, because this is where control begins. If something here hit you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will take ownership of your income, not just earning it, but directing it, because direction creates outcomes. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something that quietly separates those who build wealth from those who stay stuck. Delayed gratification. Because real estate is not about instant results. It's about choosing long-term gain over short-term comfort. And once you master that, everything accelerates. Because what you choose today will either reward you later or cost you later. Chapter 13. Delayed gratification. The decision that builds everything. Most people want results now. Faster income, faster success, faster freedom, and that desire is completely natural. But here's the problem. Real wealth does not respond to urgency. It responds to patience. And that creates tension, because your emotions want results today. But your future requires discipline today. That's where delayed gratification comes in. It's the ability to choose what benefits you later, instead of what feels good right now. And in real estate, this principle is everything, because nothing meaningful here happens overnight. You don't buy a property today and wake up wealthy tomorrow. You build slowly, consistently, intentionally. And the rewards come later. Now let's slow this down. Every decision you make has two versions, the immediate version and the long-term version. Spend now or invest now. Relax now or build now. Comfort now or growth now. And the path you follow is determined by which version you choose more often. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Short-term comfort creates long-term pressure, and long-term discipline creates short-term discomfort. That's the trade. That's the decision. And most people choose comfort because it's easy, because it feels good, because it requires no effort. But over time, that choice compounds, just like everything else. And eventually, they look up and realize nothing has changed. Now let's bring this into real estate again. When you invest, you are choosing delayed gratification. You are choosing to direct your resources toward something that grows instead of something that disappears. And at first, that can feel restrictive. You might have less flexibility, less instant reward, less visible progress. But over time, everything shifts because what you built starts producing. And once it produces, the reward becomes real. Now here's something powerful to remember. The life you want later is built by the choices you make now. There is no shortcut around that, no way to skip it. Now let's go deeper. Delayed gratification is not about deprivation. It's about alignment. It's about making sure your current actions support your future vision. Because without alignment, you move in circles. But with alignment, every step moves you forward. Now imagine this. Two people with the same income, one spends everything on lifestyle, the other invests consistently, year after year. At first, there is no visible difference, but over time, the gap grows until one is still maintaining and the other is building. That's delayed gratification in action, not dramatic, but powerful. Now here's where emotional control comes back again, because choosing long-term gain requires resisting short-term temptation. And that's not easy, because the world is designed to pull your attention, to encourage spending, to reward instant gratification, to make patience feel unnecessary. But if you follow that path, you stay in the same position. So you must decide, not once, but repeatedly, day after day, choice after choice. Now, here's a line you need to remember. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. And that choice defines your future. Now pause again. Think about your current life. Where are you choosing comfort over growth? Where are you delaying decisions that matter? Because those moments are shaping your trajectory. But here's the good news. You can change it. Starting now. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Now let's connect this back to your real estate journey. Every investment you make is a vote for your future. Every disciplined decision is a step forward. And over time, those steps create something powerful. Momentum. Now imagine your life. 5 years from now, you chose discipline. You invested consistently. You stayed patient. What would that look like? Because that future is built in the present. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you feel that shift in how you view your decisions, hold on to it, because this understanding will guide your actions. If something here hits you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will choose long-term growth over short-term comfort, because that choice is what separates those who stay stuck from those who build something real. Now in the next chapter, we're going to step into something practical again, something that determines how sustainable your journey becomes. Risk, because every investment carries it. But understanding it is what allows you to move forward with clarity instead of fear, because risk is not what stops most people. Misunderstanding it does. Chapter 14. Risk, the truth most people avoid. When people hear the word real estate, many of them think one thing: risk. What if I lose money? What if something goes wrong? What if I fail? And those questions feel heavy. They create hesitation. They create doubt. They create delay. But here's the truth. Risk is not the enemy. Ignorance is. Because everything in life carries risk. Working a job carries risk. Relying on one income carries risk. Doing nothing carries risk. But those risks feel normal, so people accept them without question. Now here's the shift. In real estate, risk is visible, it's measurable, it's analyzable, it's manageable, if you choose to understand it. Now let's break this down. There are two types of risk: uncontrolled risk and calculated risk. Uncontrolled risk is emotional. It's rushed decisions, lack of knowledge, acting without clarity. That's dangerous. That's where people get hurt. But calculated risk is different. It's based on understanding. It's based on preparation. It's based on awareness of what could go wrong and having a plan. That's how builders operate. Now, here's something powerful to remember. You don't eliminate risk. You reduce it through knowledge. That's the game. Not avoidance, but management. Now let's bring this into real estate. Every property has variables: income, expenses, market conditions, unexpected events. And your job is not to predict everything perfectly. It's to prepare intelligently. To ask, what happens if income drops? What happens if costs increase? What's my margin? Because margin is what protects you. Margin gives you space, and space reduces pressure. Now here's where discipline shows up again. Many people ignore risk when they're excited. They see potential and skip analysis. They rush decisions because they don't want to miss out. And that urgency creates mistakes. But builders slow down. They analyze, they question, they verify. Because they understand something critical. A bad deal will always look good when you ignore the risks. That's why awareness matters. Now let's go deeper. Fear of risk often comes from lack of experience. The unknown feels dangerous. But once you understand something, it becomes manageable. Think about it. Driving a car once felt risky. Now it feels normal. Why? Because you understand it. The same applies here. As your knowledge grows, your fear reduces. Not because risk disappears, but because you can handle it. Now let's connect this back to your mindset. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be informed, because fear without knowledge paralyzes, but awareness with knowledge empowers. Now here's a deeper truth. Avoiding risk completely is the biggest risk of all, because it guarantees no growth, no movement, no change. And over time, that becomes the most expensive decision. Now pause again. Think about your current life. Where are you avoiding risk but accepting stagnation? Because that trade is costing you more than you think. But once you see it, you can change it step by step. Now imagine this. You approach opportunities with clarity. You understand the numbers. You evaluate the risks. You make informed decisions. What happens? Confidence. Not emotional confidence, real confidence, the kind that comes from understanding. And that confidence allows you to move forward. Now here's a line to remember. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting with understanding despite it. And that's what you're building here. Not recklessness, not blind action, controlled movement. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you're starting to see risk differently, stay with that awareness, because this understanding will protect you. If something here hits you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will not let fear control your decisions, but you will not ignore risk either. You will understand it, because understanding is where power begins. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something that many people overlook, but it quietly determines long-term success: consistency. Because in real estate, just like in life, it's not what you do once, it's what you continue to do that creates results. And once you master consistency, you stop relying on motivation and start building momentum. Because consistency is what separates intention from results. Chapter 15. Consistency, the quiet force that builds everything. Most people start strong. They feel motivated, they feel inspired, they feel ready, and for a short time, they take action. But then something happens. Life interrupts. Energy drops. Focus fades. And slowly, they stop. Not completely, but just enough to lose momentum. And that's where most journeys end, not because of failure, but because of inconsistency. Now, here's the truth you need to hear. Success is not built on intensity. It's built on consistency. Because intensity comes and goes, but consistency creates progress. Now let's slow this down. Consistency is not about doing everything perfectly. It's not about always feeling motivated. It's about continuing even when it's not exciting, even when results are not visible, even when progress feels slow. Because real estate, just like life, rewards those who stay in the game. Now let's connect this to your journey. You don't build wealth from one deal. You build it from staying engaged, learning regularly, analyzing consistently, acting when it makes sense, adjusting when needed, and over time, those actions stack quietly, powerfully. Now here's where most people misunderstand consistency. They think it means doing something every single day, but that's not always realistic. Consistency is not about frequency alone. It's about commitment. It's about staying aligned over time, because you can be consistent weekly, consistent monthly, consistent in your thinking, consistent in your decisions, and that consistency builds momentum. Now, here's something important. Momentum is fragile in the beginning. It's easy to lose, but once it builds, it becomes powerful. Because now, every step feels easier. Every decision feels clearer. Every action feels more natural. That's what consistency creates. Now let's go deeper. Consistency builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Because every time you follow through, you reinforce something internally. I do what I say. I stay committed. I keep moving forward. And that internal trust is powerful, because once you trust yourself, you stop hesitating. You stop doubting every step. You move with clarity. Now let's look at the opposite. Inconsistency, starting and stopping, learning and forgetting, acting and withdrawing. That pattern destroys momentum, and over time, it creates frustration, because you feel like you're trying but not progressing. Now here's a powerful line to remember. You don't need perfect actions. You need repeated actions. That's the difference. Now pause again. Think about your past. Where have you been inconsistent? Where did you start something but didn't continue? Because those patterns, if not changed, will repeat. But if you recognize them, you can shift them. And once you shift them, everything changes. Now let's bring this back to real estate. If you stay consistent, You learn faster, you recognize opportunities quicker, you make better decisions. And over time, you build something real, not theoretical, not imagined, but tangible. Now imagine this. You commit to consistency, not perfection, just consistency. You stay engaged. You keep learning. You keep moving. What happens? Growth. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Now here's something deeper. Consistency removes pressure. Because when you know you'll keep going, you don't need everything to work perfectly right away. You trust the process. And that trust creates stability. Now imagine your future again. Not different because of one big move, but because of many small ones. Repeated, aligned, consistent. That's how real change happens. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you're starting to understand the power of staying consistent, hold on to that. Because this is where most people fail and where a few succeed. If something here hit you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will stay consistent, even when it's boring, even when it's slow, even when no one sees it, because that's where real progress is built. Now in the next chapter, we're going to step into something that amplifies everything you've learned so far. Scaling. Because once you have consistency, the next step is growth. And growth requires a new level of thinking, a new level of strategy, and a new level of identity. Because what got you started is not what will take you further. And once you understand how to scale, you begin to move from effort to expansion, because scaling is where the game truly changes. Chapter 16, Scaling, from effort to expansion. At the beginning, everything feels personal. Your first decision, your first property, your first experience. You're involved in every detail. You're learning, adjusting, figuring things out. And that stage is necessary because it builds your foundation. But at some point, if you want real growth, you must shift from doing everything to building something that grows beyond you. That's scaling. And scaling is not just about getting more, it's about becoming more strategic. Now let's slow this down. Most people approach growth the same way they approach work. They try to do more effort, more time, more involvement. But that approach has limits because your time is limited, your energy is limited, your capacity is limited. So if you want to grow beyond those limits, you need systems, you need structure, you need leverage. That's where everything connects. Now think about this. Your first property required your full attention, but your second should require less confusion, less hesitation, more clarity, and by the time you reach your third or fourth, you should be operating with systems, processes, understanding. That's scaling, not chaos, but structure. Now here's something important. Scaling is not about rushing. It's about readiness. Because if you grow too fast, without structure, you create stress. You create instability. And eventually, things break. But if you scale with intention, if you build properly, growth becomes sustainable, and sustainability is what creates long-term success. Now let's go deeper. Scaling requires a shift in identity. You can't think like a beginner and operate at a higher level. You must become more decisive, more analytical, more focused, because now your decisions affect more than one outcome. They affect systems, they affect multiple streams, and that responsibility requires growth. Now here's a powerful line to remember. Growth doesn't just expand your results, it exposes your weaknesses. So as you scale, you will see where you need to improve your systems, your habits, your thinking, and that's a good thing because awareness leads to refinement. Now let's talk about something practical, efficiency, because scaling is not just about acquiring more. It's about managing better, optimizing, improving what you already have. Because sometimes the fastest way to grow is not adding something new. It's improving what exists. Better management, better decisions, better structure. And those improvements multiply your results. Now imagine this. You have one property producing consistently. You understand it. You manage it well. Now you add another. But this time, you're not guessing. You're applying what you've learned. And because of that, the process becomes smoother, more efficient, more controlled. That's scaling done right. Now let's go even deeper. Scaling also requires letting go. Letting go of control in certain areas. Letting go of doing everything yourself. Because if you try to control everything, you limit your growth. But if you build systems, if you create structure, you allow things to operate without constant input. That's the goal. Now here's something many people struggle with. Trust. Trusting systems. Trusting processes. Trusting growth. Because control feels safe, but too much control prevents expansion. So you must learn to balance it, not blindly letting go, but intentionally building systems that support your growth. Now pause again. Think about your current approach. Are you trying to do everything? Are you holding on to control out of fear? Because that pattern will limit you, but once you recognize it, you can shift. Now imagine your future, not just one asset, but multiple, not just effort, but systems, not just income, but structure. That's what scaling creates. Now here's a deeper truth. Scaling is not about speed, it's about direction. Because growing fast in the wrong direction leads to failure. But growing steadily in the right direction creates lasting success. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you're starting to see growth differently, stay with that awareness, because scaling is where your journey evolves. If something here hits you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will not rush growth, but you will prepare for it, because preparation creates sustainable expansion. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to uncover something even more powerful: freedom. Because everything you're building leads to one outcome, not just money, not just assets, but control over your life. And once you understand what real freedom looks like, you begin to build with even more clarity. Because freedom is the reason you started listening in the first place. Chapter 17. Freedom, what you're really building. Most people say they want money, more income, more success, more financial security. But if you go deeper, if you strip away the surface, money is not the real goal. Freedom is. Freedom to choose, freedom to decide, freedom to live without constant pressure. Because money, without freedom, still feels like a trap. Now let's slow this down. What does freedom actually mean? It's not luxury. It's not status. It's not showing the world what you have. Freedom is control. Control over your time. Control over your decisions. Control over how you live your life. And real estate, when approached correctly, is one of the most powerful ways to build that control. Now here's the truth most people never realize. Freedom is not about having more. It's about needing less from what controls you. Because if your entire life depends on one source, one job, one income stream. You are not free, you are dependent, and dependency creates pressure. Now imagine something different. You have multiple streams of income, systems that produce consistently, assets that work quietly in the background. What happens? Pressure decreases, options increase, and options are the foundation of freedom. Now let's go deeper. Freedom is not instant. It's built, layer by layer, decision by decision. Every asset you acquire reduces your dependence. Every system you build increases your control. And over time, that balance shifts until one day you realize something has changed. You're no longer reacting to life, you're designing it. Now, here's something important. Freedom looks different for everyone. For some, it means leaving a job. For others, it means reducing stress. For others, it means having time with family. There is no single version, and that's the point. Freedom is personal. Now let's connect this back to your journey. Everything you've learned so far leads here. Leverage, cash flow, consistency, scaling, all of it builds toward freedom. Not just income, not just assets, control. Now, here's a powerful line to remember. The goal is not to escape work, it's to choose it. Because when you have freedom, you don't stop working, you work on what matters, you choose your focus, you decide your direction, and that choice is everything. Now let's talk about something deeper, emotional freedom. Because financial freedom without emotional control still feels unstable. If you're constantly stressed, constantly worried, constantly reactive, then even with money, you won't feel free. That's why everything in this audiobook connects mindset, habits, discipline. Because true freedom is internal and external. Now pause again. Think about your life. What would freedom look like for you? Be honest. Not what others expect, not what looks impressive. What actually matters to you? Because that answer should guide everything you build. Now imagine this. You wake up and you're not rushing. You're not stressed. You're not forced into decisions. You have space. You have control. You have options. That's freedom. And it's not a fantasy. It's a result of consistent, intentional decisions. Now here's the deeper truth. Freedom is not given. It's built. And most people never build it, not because they can't, but because they never commit. They stay comfortable. They stay reactive. They stay in cycles. But you're here. You're learning. You're thinking differently. And that difference is where everything begins. Now, if this chapter resonates, if you feel that deeper connection to what you're building, hold on to it. Because this is your why. This is what keeps you consistent. This is what keeps you focused. Now, if something here hits you, take a moment, reflect, and make another quiet commitment that you will not just chase money, but you will build freedom. If this audiobook gave you clarity, let that be your signal, not just to listen, but to act. Because information without action is just noise. And you're not here for noise. You're here to build something real. And if you're committed to growth, to discipline, to becoming someone who creates freedom, then stay connected to this journey. Because this is not the end. This is the beginning. Now ask yourself one final question. Am I ready to build the life I keep thinking about? Because the answer is not in your thoughts. It's in your actions. This was the Real Estate Wealth Code. How regular people get rich with property. Full audiobook. And now, the story continues with you.